Hello and welcome everyone present here and those also following us online. My name is Любовь Pronina. I'm a Brussels-based journalist and I will steer today's conversation on the EU automobile trilemma, balancing between industrial transition, climate ambitions and economic competitiveness. Few sectors illustrate this challenge better than the automobile industry. Take a modern car. It is made up of thousands of components. Behind every vehicle there is an ecosystem of engineers, software developers, battery manufacturers, logistics companies, and thousands of small and medium-sized enterprises. The automobile sector contributes around 7% to the European Union GDP, and it also supports about 13 million jobs, making it one of Europe's most important industrial sectors, and it has been the driver of the transformation and innovation. And this success story is now entering a new chapter, and along with it come job cuts and plant closures and shrinking margins, and also the growing costs, especially amid the ongoing geopolitical uncertainty. And at the same time, the manufacturing industry is contributing billions of euros into digitalization and electrification. Also that amid growing global competition, especially from China. And at the same time, the European Union is pursuing a very, very ambitious climate agenda, while also seeking to strengthen strategic autonomy and industrial resilience. The European Automobile Manufacturers Association, in its position paper earlier this month, said that the industry needs a framework that helps rather than hinders this transition, because hollowing out the industry base is actually very real. So today's conversation is not only about cars, but about the future of European industry, about economic competitiveness, and also what actually Europe wants to build as its economy, as its economic model. And that raises some fundamental questions. Can Europe remain a global automotive leader while accelerating the transition to climate neutrality? How can the industrial policy, the Industrial Accelerator Act, the Automotive Package, and the Made in Europe initiative support innovation and investment without undermining competitiveness? And how do we ensure that this transition is not only green, but also economically and socially viable and sustainable? And for these questions, we have an amazing panel today representing lawmakers, industry, and other stakeholders. And I will introduce, and I will start from Christophe Grudler, who's a French member of the European Parliament since 2019. He serves as the coordinator for Renew of the committee, on the Committee of Industry, Research and Energy. He was the Renew Europe negotiator for the Net Zero Industry Act. He has also acted as a shadow rapporteur for his political group on the European Industrial Strategy, the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive, and Repower EU. Currently, Christophe is co-rapporteur for the Industrial Accelerator Act, and we'll quiz him on that. He will have to leave a little bit earlier, so we need to make sure that we get the best insights from him. Likewise, from the MEP sitting next to him, Pellerin-Carlin, also a French MEP, and before joining the European Parliament, he is now on the Committee for Industry, Research and Energy, and also Environment and Climate Committee. He worked as a research director specializing in EU energy and climate policy at the Institute for Climate Economics. Thomas is a shadow rapporteur on the revision of the CO2 standard for cars. Now we skip over to another MEP, to Zala Černilec. Tomašič, a Slovenian politician who became the youngest Slovenian MEP ever elected. And she is present on 3 committees. I'll list them. So, Committee on Environment, Public Health and Food Safety, Internal Market and Consumer Protection, and Industry, Research and Energy. These 3 committees that are quite crucial to the legislative proposals that we're going to discuss today. And next to me, Isabel Scheckenbach, who's head of the climate program within the Energy, Resources and Climate Change Unit at the Center for European Policy Studies. Isabel is a sustainability expert, and she has 13 years of international experience at the intersection of climate policy, nature risk, and sustainable finance. And last but not the least, in the center, we have our representative from the industry who represents of Europe, one of Europe's most iconic manufacturers. BMW is not only a global automotive company, but also illustrates many of the opportunities and challenges that we will discuss today. Please welcome Frank Niederländer. He's head of Government Affairs Europe in the BMW Group in Brussels, and he held various positions within the group, including in research, development, strategic planning, product development, finance and controlling. BMW, what do we know about this big company? For the last year, it produced almost 2.5 million cars. Is that right? And it employs more than 150,000 people. The revenue last year was 133.5 billion. And it sources nearly 80 billion in materials and components supplies. Is that right? A little bit more, okay, so it's growing this year. And more than 1 in 4 vehicles it sells is electrified. So again, going with the latest developments. We're going to have a discussion for about 60 meters with our esteemed panelists, and after that we will have an opportunity from the audience to ask questions. Those that are following us online, if you can download Slido, and it's hashtag industrial transition. You can find it and you can post your questions. Please notify who your question is addressed to, and if you want, you can also introduce yourself. So without further ado, let's go into the question. Now, this is the question that I want to ask everybody present here at the panel. When we talk about the sector, one of the landmark years is 2035, right? This is when the industry is required to hit 90% reduction in average tailpipe emission, and also when it comes to manufacturing contribution to European GDP, it also is expected to reach 20% by 2035. But that's 9 years away from us. Let's take a shorter period, 5 years. And what do you see as the single biggest challenge facing Europe automotive industry over the next 5 years? Is it regulation, energy prices, geopolitical situation, access to critical raw materials, competition from China? And I would like to start with you, Christophe.
Thank you very much. Well, there is, in my view, the first problem, the challenge is the competition from China. It's clear because it is unfair competition with a lot of state subsidies, and the goal is to destroy our industry, our automotive industry especially. And when it leads, of course, to the prices. But you know that if the Chinese arrive with lower prices, it is in order to kill the competition, to kill our European industrial, and then after that, when they have killed them, they will come back in 5 or 10 years, and the price will not be the cheapest in the world. It will be the highest in the world because they will be in a monopolistic situation. And we need we never need to forget it when we have the automotive package, when we have industrial accelerator and other files, when we try to find a fair competition. It's not against the competition, a fair competition. It means no subsidies or the same subsidies, and if it is not respect, we have tools to make inquiry and to find also the way to support our automotive sector. Then the problem is not the 2035 target. The future will be electric. Maybe not for all, but the future will be electric, because we'll stop our dependency. In Europe, we import 58% of our energy. And we say we'll accelerate the electrification. It's to stop depending on the others. And we need a very competitive automotive sector linked to battery production, to the grids, to the best car in the world. Never forget it. It's always important. I always say I will support the European cars, but you need to produce the best car in the world. I will not hear anymore that the Chinese cars are better than ours. You need to push for research, investment to have things like that. That's the reason why maybe it's the last challenge I will talk about. We need to have strong guidelines without legislative file moving each day. One day it is black, the day after it is white. And well, we need to reassure the investors. We need to explain to the companies, okay, here is the way. It is what we want to do together. And you can be reassured for 10, 15 or 20 years. Okay, it is a transition. We start from point 1 to point 2. As it is a transition, in the middle, instead of going straight ahead, maybe we can do like that, if you have some difficulty, but never forget the goal.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for being long.
Thank you very much, Christophe. Thomas, how about yourself? Do you agree? Is it China, or is it anything else, or lots of different factors?
The number one factor is indeed China, but the second one is something I get to the second one by understanding one of the reasons why China became so good. If we had been in this room and someone would have told you, 20 years ago, we are in 2006, and you ask someone who tells you that in 20 years, China would be producing the best cars in the world, not only the cheapest one, but the best one, many people would have been skeptics, and rightly so. So what did they do? The one thing they did and that we need to learn from is that they had a clear strategy. They did not listen to the diesel lobby. They kept investing. They kept calm. They carried on. China decided to make battery a strategic technology under Chinese law in 2003. From 2003 to 2015, everybody in China was investing, all Chinese actors were investing in battery development. In Europe, we had several OEMs that invested in software to violate EU law, as we discovered under the Dieselgate. That's a choice of R&D that proved very not beneficial, especially for the OEMs that had to pay a big fine in the US. I think Volkswagen was 15 or 25 billion dollars that they had to pay in the US. 16 billion, thank you. How much money could have been invested in R&D rather than in cheating and then paying a fine to the US taxpayer. One very interesting story is the LFP battery. But by a show of hands, can you tell me if you understand the difference between NMC and LFP? Okay. So those are the two main battery technologies. Sometimes people say we need to be technology neutral, and they think that battery is a technology, which is a very odd. Battery is not a technology; it's a sector. And you've got many different types of battery technologies, just like you have many different energy sources. When it comes to cars, you need battery that have a high energy density, meaning that you have a lot of kilowatt hour. That's the unit of measurement of energy, in a small volume, because you don't want the car to be too big, and a small weight, because obviously the lighter the car, the more energy efficient it is. NMC is the, let's say, technology that Europeans have invested most. LFP was originally a Euro-Canadian technology, developed in 2006. And the Europeans, the Canadians, they were like, LFP, we're not going to invest into that. It has no future because it's a little bit less energy dense, and therefore that's not for the European car makers. BYD, the Chinese company, said, it's actually an interesting technology from many, many perspectives. And so they took that technology on board in 2006 and invested time and again and again and again, trial and error, experiments, research, innovation. And at the end of the day, one of the reasons why China is much better at producing cheap electric cars than us has to do with the battery, because they've invested heavily in LFP. 4 years ago, the car lobby in Europe was saying there is no future for LFP. The future is NMC, and everything in Europe would be NMC batteries only. After, let's say, around 2022, 23, more or less, depending on the OEMs, one by one, they realized their mistakes. And they realized that there is room for both LFP and NMC, depending on the type of car that you're producing. I'm assuming you're really NFP heavy when it comes to a premium brand like BMW. It makes sense. But for, like Volkswagen, like the cars for the people, having an LFP is also important there. So through that story of LFP, my main message is no flip-flopping. And the flip-flopping is the worst industrial policy you can have. One of the business leaders from my region in Normandy, I know him quite well now. 3 years ago, he was against CO2 standard for cars. 3 years ago, he was saying, we should not do this, blah, blah, blah. The legislation passed, and I said, well, we've invested. The toothpaste is out of the tube, and the only way forward is forward. And I hope we can understand this. And if we understand that the only way forward is forward, not, posting pictures of the internal combustion engine on Twitter, on X, that would already be an improvement to make sure that we can have an adult conversation on what are the policy mix with CO2 standard for cars, with the super credits, with the type of green steel flexibilities that is needed, with the IAA, with European preference, with the joint venture strategy, with the battery booster, with all of this, to make sure that we can have an entire value chain for the battery electric car, from the cradle to the grave, from the mining of lithium in Germany, in France, and in other places, to the recycling, going through all of this.
Thank you very much, Thomas. So, the message, no flip-flopping policies, and the only way forward is forward. So we have 2 votes about China. Frank, BMW, has China as a market, so would you agree it's also China?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to take on the title of the session today, and for me it's, on the one hand it's a trilemma, but on the other hand, as for Europe, I think I'm happy that meanwhile the politics are looking at the business issue on all 3 perspectives. I think especially in the first term, perhaps also due to the diesel scandal, it was green only, and the competitiveness element and the industrial transition hadn't been in the focus. And I'm very long time in the industry, and I remember times like 10 years ago, everyone was believing that service industry is the only one, and only let's say the true production now has come to focus on the one hand for competitiveness, but also as times have changed, defense needs those capability, and so this triangle now is, in my opinion, the real focus. The second element, as for China, is, and you're absolutely right, 20 years ago, I remember the first days in Beijing, having seen the first industry attempts from China. Had been a different world. Yeah, the whole market, you must know, had been 800,000 cars at that time. The market, a number BMW was selling last year in China, and now China is one of the biggest markets with 20 million cars, and that's something which to me is very important to mention for Europe, because I think together with the industries, and probably it's different, the same for other sectors, we have to believe in Europe that there's growth behind that. I have seen the doom discussions on my industry for for many years. On the same time, you've seen every big region, whether it's China, India, it's Latin America, it's US, all are trying to onshore their own industry. And I think that's a key element where this element of competitiveness of industry putting into focus in Europe is so important. We should not give up that notion. And I always try to quantify what is competitiveness. For me, at the end, it's do European companies get global market shares? At the end, that's the currency which is relevant. For us, of course, it's Europe, but it's also a market share we get in China. It's the market shares we get in the US. And that, at the end, determines whether you can say you are competitive or you're not. What's true, Chinese market, so I'm really talking about Chinese competition in China, has changed tremendously. We have seen that, or we have faced a challenge that for 3 years during COVID, it had been a black box, and China had developed tremendously in that time in terms of technology, product, and so on, which had led to this advantage in competitiveness. Because normally, when you're working in a market as we do right now, you see it. You see the competition is coming up, and you see how you need to act. And what I believe right now is, once you manage to compete in China, that will also drive innovation and, let's say, advancement in Europe for the European market. Now we are coming to the China policy, and that's where I can hear this element of, how you say, stability on decisions, on policy decision and the Chinese plan. But there are 2-3 things I'd like to mention. First of all, you have the 5-year plan in China, as you know, but it's a evolving one. So each year it's updated, each year the priorities are reviewed, each year they look how things are going forward. China, as for the key value chain we are looking for Europe today, had worked on those for 3 decades. So now we are catching up something in 10 years' time, which they did for a much longer period of time. China is a stronger economy with more growth, so they had been able to finance that. And they had been building on different technology also. We perceive here in Europe mainly the electric side, where they had done a tremendous job through whole power generation, power grid, the battery side, and so on. But they are also working from the, let's say, the combustion engine up to the hydrogen one. If you ask my colleagues working or seeing the competition in Latin America, in Asia, it's not the electric part there where they are competing then. So in essence, and to come back to your point, I think we need to understand China. We need to strengthen ourselves to be competitive. I believe it's not possible if you focus only on the European market, because then you protect yourself for a while, but then get overwhelmed over time. And last but not least, I think, and that's a key point, to be able to counterbalance China, they must believe that you are strong. And that's something which probably works for a while with trade defense, yes. But I think it's much more important that European industry is perceived to be strong. And that's something where we have to work on that. And last but not least, was China is accepting. They accept a huge intra-company competition within China. Means that they accept that, taking the example of OEMs, some would die. So they would get for the top 3 OEMs, the top 4. And I'm wondering how this would look like in Europe if a Commission plan would set this target.
Thank you very much, Frank, for this very insightful opinions and what I made a note of for myself, that you have to be really present in China and compete in China, and that will help you on the domestic market, and you have to understand China and you have to show strength, that you're a strong competitor. Thank you very much again for that. And now to ladies, Zala, maybe you throw in a different view.
Yeah, so does this work? Oh, okay, it works. So welcome everyone, and thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy that on this hot summer day you decided to be here listening to us talking about, probably for the 100th time, on the automotive industry. So hopefully you're not here only because of the AC. But anyway, at the beginning of your question, you listed several factors. And I don't think it's as easy as to say just China, even though I do agree with my French colleagues that it is a huge, huge factor. But I think when we look at China, we have to compare the situation in China and the EU. So China, for decades, has been subsidizing their auto industry. They were investing huge amounts of money into their OEMs. They were creating new brands. They didn't care like if one brand fell apart. They had 100 others, you know, a couple of them survived. They made a global impact nowadays. So that was the situation for China. They didn't have as many regulations as we had the EU. They didn't have ETS. They have cheap electricity, you know, like access to cheap materials, to critical raw materials, all of that. Versus on the European side, the situation is a bit different. We have high environmental standards. We have even higher salaries. Taxations are different in member states. All of these affect what is happening. And not to say that, whereas China was really subsidizing their companies, in some ways we were putting penalties on ours and deciding targets and so on. So I don't think it's just like you say, oh, it's China. I think you really have to look at in depth at what's happening in China and what's happening in the EU. So yes, I would agree China is a factor, but you have so many other aspects, from the energy prices, from regulation that it is. And it doesn't even matter that much right now how we got here, I think. I think it's more important now, what are we gonna do in the future? And I think that our biggest problem right now is that there is a mismatch between legislation and the reality. And I think we need to address this. And I know we're gonna go more into details about all of this. I'm not gonna take this time, but I'm just gonna say that although China has surpassed us in many of the technologies in a lot of ways, I'm still an optimist, and I think that the one thing where European manufacturers are still stronger is that when we move away from just talking about the automotive industry, about the regulations, about emissions. This is not European automotive industry. European automotive industry has history, old traditions. It's the cars. Wherever you travel around the world, people know German cars, also French, you know, but mostly German, or Italian, you know, they're dreaming of having a Ferrari. I haven't met a single person that's like, oh, my dream car is a BYD, you know, like, I can't wait to afford that. So I think we have a really strong label of excellence that Chinese, I mean, they are getting it, but they're still not on the same status level when it comes to buying a car. So I think here we still have an advantage. So now, as policymakers, I think we just have to correct the legislation to match the reality of where we are. And the reality is that I agree that battery electric vehicles are gonna play a really big part in the future, but I don't think that the future is necessarily electric. I do think it's carbon neutral, but I don't think that necessarily translates into electric. And now, just to conclude, I just wanna know, so that we all know, can you raise your hands, the ones that have a battery electric vehicle?
We have a few.
Okay, and now can we do hybrids?
A little bit more.
Petrol? Okay, and diesel? And no car?
Public transportation.
Oh, the majority, so the public transport ones. And well, and this is another point I want to make. It's also, when we're talking about mobility, we also can't ignore this part, you know? I'm a huge, huge, huge supporter of having like really high-speed trains and railroads, so hopefully we're gonna be working on that as well, especially to Strasbourg, you know?
Thank you very much, Zala. I will also raise my hand for public transportation. Isabel, we've heard quite a lot of comments about China. What is your overview?
Yeah, I would maybe like to touch on a different perspective and
Yes.
bring in the climate and the finance perspective. So in the short term, I would say we face definitely like a resilience challenge in the automotive industry. From the climate side, I think that currently automotive players are not pricing correctly climate and nature-related risk into their business decisions. And I think we've seen that all around. We have like heat waves that make production stop and leading like to less produced volume and then of course less sales. We have like extreme water risk in some regions where we cannot like, that affect the production. We don't have sufficient access to natural resources anymore, which will even aggravate in the future. And I think that's currently not considered sufficiently, and we should definitely look into that. And then you already mentioned how complex supply chains are in the automotive industry, and I think that's actually one of the things that China did really well when they were like developing the strategy and trying to create the transformation. They focused on the whole ecosystem, so they didn't just look at automotive makers, but they looked at their battery technology. They secured access to raw materials and rare materials like lithium and made sure that they have access on it. The European industry is quite dependent on like those, and if we see that with the Strait of Hormuz closing now, that it's very difficult to actually gain access to the materials that you need. So I think we need to increase the transparency of supply chain and make sure that we localize more of the production and bring it back to Europe.
Thank you very much. So picking up on what has been said after the first question, that what you, Frank, said that you have to show strength in competition, and Zala, you said there is a mismatch, right, between legislation and reality. So I want to go back to Christophe, who is a co-rapporteur on the Industrial Accelerator Act. So is it going to help? What's your sales pitch for the Industrial Accelerator Act? And just sorry for interrupting, if we can keep our answers short, in 1 or 2 minutes max. Thank you.
Okay, we'll try to do it. The problem with the Industrial Accelerator, it's coming to few lead markets, and sometimes it's a little bit complex. But the only thing I want to say, the first thing I want to say, is that the accelerator is here to strengthen the investment in Europe for some decarbonized lead markets. And those lead markets are steel, aluminium, cement, automotive, and all the technologies of the Net Zero Industry Act. It means renewables, but not only. Nuclear technology are also included. In order to meet this goal, first signal, it is straight ahead. You can reassure the investors for 15 years. And the second thing is we have some tools to help those lead market to start. First with European preference for public procurement, with purchase incentives, with corporate fleets. Also, it's not directly to. It's not only industrial accelerator. Is with the package of the for the text talking about automotive, and it on super credits, of course, for the cheapest electric vehicles we can produce. Here are some tools that we can use. Sometimes it's a little bit complex about the European preference, for example, because have some different views on that. For me, it is clear if we want to meet the goal to have more investment in Europe, not only in the European Union, because maybe with Great Britain, with EEA countries, with Switzerland, it's possible to find agreement to add them. But if we want to strengthen the investment here, we need to have a scope in Europe. And sometimes it's difficult with the automotive sector because they used to have maybe some component coming from far away. But if we had some other countries, the investors, especially the Chinese, Korean, and so on, will invest in Brazil, in New Zealand. They will not strengthen the investment in Europe. That's the reason why we need to have a scope in Europe. And maybe I can talk more about it later. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this, Christophe. And we got a question from our online audience, and I would like to address it to Thomas, although they don't say. But you were talking about batteries at length, so this question is for you. Is the Industrial Accelerator Act doing enough to enable battery production in the European Union?
So let's think like an investor. You want to invest, why would you invest in battery manufacturing in Europe? Like, the first thing would be to serve the EU market. That's essentially it. You won't build batteries in Europe to export them to China. Like, it just does not make sense. So you will serve the EU market and maybe a few other markets that want to de-risk from China, in South America, in Africa. Then you look at the type of, the battery business is a scale business. If you want to understand every 3 years, the International Energy Agency publishes a brilliant report called the Energy Technology Perspectives report. Back when I was a researcher, I did contribute to one of the earlier editions. Obviously, I didn't have time as an MEP to contribute to the 2026 edition. But what they looked into is they looked at all the major clean tech technologies, including batteries, and look at understanding why we have a price difference between stuff that are made in EU and stuff that are made in China. And for batteries, it's actually very good news for Europe, because 70% of the price difference is linked to two things that are linked to scale. The first is manufacturing efficiency. So we could already reduce the cost gap between us and China just by adopting state-of-the-art industrial processes. They did more automation because they invested earlier and because they invested at scale. So what we need to do is to catch up, and the way we do that is what the Institut Montaigne, which is a center-right think tank in France, has called Deng Xiaoping in reverse. We just do for Europe in the 2020s what Deng did in China in the 80s and later. So that's what I would otherwise call the joint venture strategy, because we need to get the best tech. So through this, we already can reduce our gap, of course, by 40%. And then the second element is the price of the components. So by and large, like the two critical elements when you need to make a battery is the cathode and the anode. Just like a battery, there's a plus and a minus. They're essentially the same thing. On anode, it's a bit tricky. There are a few things still that we need to, at least I do need to understand better. But for the cathode, it's very straightforward. And we already have a project led by Renault, close to Dunkirk, when they have a positive joint venture with one of the leaders, XTC, in order to produce cathode material in a 51-49% joint venture in the north of Europe. So currently, we see the industry catching up when it comes to batteries. If you look, and here again, that's my latest conversation with the International Energy Agency researchers. So they know I'm a politician now, and they were like, "Is it okay if can we still send you Excel spreadsheets?" And I said, "Yes, love them." So today in Europe, we have the capacity to produce 170 gigawatt hour of battery per year. That is the existing facilities that are already producing. In the pipeline, we have an extra 610 of stuff that are either under construction or we already have an FID, so final investment decision. Just with this, we will have, by 2030, enough battery capacity to produce 7 to 9 million cars. So more than what we will see in terms of demand in Europe. And so it means that any cut to the regulatory ambition, anyone who says the future of the car is not electric is actually harming not future investment, existing investments that have been made by the private sector. And so my conclusion is that I think our first duty as politicians is the same as the first duty of doctors. Primum non nocere. First, do no harm. And so the first thing we should not do is flip-flopping policies that would destroy the investment signal and that would see happen in Europe what we saw happening in the US last year, which is a policy U-turn led by far-right ideology that led American but also European OEMs like Stellantis to have one of the biggest asset devaluation in their history. So that policy signal is critical, and therefore, if we lose the battle on the CO2 standard for cars, we'll lose the battle on the entire value chain, because a value chain is just like a real chain, a physical chain. Its solidity is the solidity of the weakest link, and here there's the temptation by the far right to transform one of the strong links that we have, which is the CO2 standard for cars regulation, into something that is essentially so soft that it loses all its purpose.
It was a very detailed answer, and I hope that it answers the question from our online audience. And Zala, you want to come in and...
I just want to say I fully support, that we start producing batteries in Europe, absolutely, and I think that is crucial. But I think we're forgetting a very important part, that the critical raw materials needed for the batteries, we don't have that in Europe. No, we don't have that. Yeah. We don't have that in Europe. And when they tried to open mining in Serbia, I mean, there was a whole revolt of how dirty and environmentally unfriendly that is. We do not have enough critical raw materials. And even the ones that we do have, the majority of them is refined in China. This is why I definitely think we shouldn't be dependent on fossil fuels. That is a big weakness for the EU. But with solely focusing on battery electric vehicles, we are just trading that dependency with another one on China. And the other thing that I think we're often confused, or when we're in a panel, is that with what we're doing with the 2035 targets, and changing it now, and I'm referring also to the MEP Salini's report, we're not banning battery electric vehicles. Like, nothing is happening to them. You're still going to be able to develop them. You're still going to be able to sell them. People are going to be able to buy them. Member states are going to be able to subsidize them. We're not doing any of that. Battery electric vehicles are staying. What we're doing is just ensuring that people have a choice so they can buy a different vehicle. Sorry, I know you're wanting to cut me here, but I just want to say that, like, nobody is saying no to that. If an OEM decides battery electric vehicles is the way to go, nobody is saying no. You should be producing ICE, or you should be producing plug-in hybrids. You can go fully electric. Like, why should the politicians say you must do this or you mustn't do this? Let the industry decide. And if it makes sense for them to produce fully electric vehicles, they're still able to do this regardless what's happened in the parliament and in the council at the end of these negotiations. Like, this is gonna stay the same, and we could still have, if this is the way and this is where the manufacturers and consumers wanna go, fully electric cars, 100% electric cars. It's just we don't have to ban them, ban other options.
Thank you very much, Zala, but very quickly, yeah.
Very quickly, two things on lithium and the Salini report. Can you raise your arm if you've ever visited a lithium extraction site? Am I the only one? Oh, two of us. You know where there is one? In Strasbourg, not far away. Actually, I gave the details to your colleague, Matai Tonin, because we talked about that in the last plenary. So 40 minutes away from Strasbourg, you have a site with the capacity using also geothermal, which is one of the way you can extract lithium. Just that site, just in Alsace, which is a very small region in eastern France, they have enough lithium to manufacture 700,000, so less than 1 million battery electric cars. We have another site in Allier in the south of France, different kind, closer to the type of mining that we see elsewhere. There are sites in Finland, there are sites in Germany. And by the way, do you know who is the biggest producer of lithium in the world? Australia. And the second one, Chile. We can import lithium from Australia and Chile and refining. Yeah, but I mean, indeed, you're right. You're 100% right. Where China is strong on the battery, it starts with the refining part. But refining is an industrial choice. It's not linked to geology. On the Salini report, you're right. Like, people will be free to buy an electric car. I mean, thank God. We are free to do something that is good for energy security. Okay, yeah. The key point is on predictability. The existing law provides a lot of predictability because it says that by 2035, 100% of the cars will be BEVs. You can look at the number of cars, you can guesstimate the millions of cars that will be sold, you can guesstimate the gigawatt hour, the battery amount. The Commission's proposal brings that 100% BEV to essentially 85-ish 4%. The Salini brings that to zero. I mean, if that's the plan, if the plan is to provide no predictability whatsoever to a critical sector of the economy, then I'm not sure there is a majority for that in Parliament.
Thank you very much for this clarification. And now I would like to...
Just to finish on that point very shortly, we have no problem with critical raw material. We have no problem yet. Okay, we can have maybe in autumn, if the Chinese decide to cut. That's the reason why we vote during last plenary a mandate to the ITRE committee in order to create very quickly the CRM center, which will be able to store a lot of critical raw material in order to have enough things for our batteries. But it's not only a question of mining. Mining, it's a long-term solution because 10 years maybe to open a new mine. But it's about refining and also about recycling. Don't forget recycling because we trust in recycling the batteries. Sometimes it's difficult because the lithium, ion lithium batteries are not exactly the same process for all the batteries, but there is clearly a market for those recycling system if we are able, of course, to feed. But well, we have this here.
Thank you very much, Christophe. And I would like to ask the industry, Frank, as Zala said, that there should be a choice for the industry and should be a choice for consumers. What do you think about it as a producer? And also when it comes to the legislation, we have a question here. Which component of the automotive package is envisaging the largest room for criticism from the automotive industry? And a question from me, if there is one thing you would like to see changed or done in the legislation, upcoming legislation, what would it be? Thank you.
Yeah, it's hard to answer, and that's a simple one. Depending on the file we're talking about, if it's the IRA, I would say the battery timeline. That's the crucial thing. But let me come back to the discussion which has happened. I think at the beginning it was important to have this black and white discussion, either electric or combustion, to really get momentum in the topic. In the terms of the transition, I'm not sure whether that's the right way to go. We have answered it for our company to go with 5 technologies to manage the transition. And honestly speaking, you have 2 combustion engines, you have the electric, you have the plug-in hybrid, and now we are launching a hydrogen one. And it's costly, yes, but that was the only way in this bumpy road over the last years to gain market shares. And as we say, we're ramping up consistently our share in the electric share of the sales up to 25%. But if you look, you mentioned one competitor, but others, the focus on one single technology was a dangerous one. And that's why I have a completely different view on predictability. Of course, you can say I force a certain technology to be the one, and by that giving, let's say, a safe market to investors. But there's one factor, which is market size. If it's not 14 million cars as it is now, or even 15, 16, and it has been, but only 9 million cars, you have lowered the industry scope compared to a 20 million car market and production size in China, or 16, 17 in the US. And that's where I think forcing that transition by only one way, without knowing how the market is developing, how the customer is risking production. It's risking economic power, and that's, Christophe, you mentioned it right from the beginning, then where the monopoly strategy from a dominant player like China is working out, because you can squeeze the others out, because you have the strong economic power, you have a better return on your investment because you have a bigger home market. And in a couple of years, you will quote perhaps then the car industry as the solar panel industry as non-existing. And that's why this element of flexibility, for me, it's quite key. And honestly speaking, no matter what of those 4 files, we know exactly the parameters where they would influence our business model. And my key task right now is not at all to lead any dogmatic discussions, but really to say, okay, where are the levers? And coming back to your question, as for the battery industry, it's the 6 months after entry into force, which are in the current proposal, which in our opinion doesn't work. I think more players, which had even said before it would work, acknowledge right now that it would work. If we're talking about 2030 plus, a different story. But that's a key element. And there's one thing I would like to correct. The failure of the battery projects in Europe were not due to the markets and not due to the customer. We had been looking at those, and we didn't take on those because it didn't work for scale and the quality you needed at time of launch. And the key element we have, you know it better than I, you have 3 key projects, and still it's issue of getting ramping up. And the market would be there, and that's why we believe it's possible. It's possible with cooperation, different partners. It's about creating the value chain, and that's something you need time. And LFP is a good example. You know very well the different technology, but one of the current one is the pouch technology, where we say for the small cars you need the prismatic one, and that's a next cutting edge technology what Europe should have as a leading one, and not taking the old ones which have been produced before. And having that combination, really cutting edge technology, having the know-how, having the workers being able to operate the factories, having the IP rights, that's the point which is taking time. And again, where I say this is not feasible, 6 months would be, I don't know how fast you will be, but by the end of next year.
Thank you very much, Frank. If there was one thing, I will come to you, Isabel. If there was one thing that you would really like from legislators to help your business and broadly European industry, what would it be?
I would say we call it technology neutrality at the beginning. I know it's contested. At the end, we have a handful of criteria. I think on the IAA, I kept on it. IAA, you have, I can cite it. IAA, you have 3 criteria. The assembly part, yeah, there the only issue for us is UK, getting UK in. The second one is the local content requirement on the classical components, where I say that's fair, and for me it's really strengthening the suppliers. That's really protecting. And the third one is the strategic one, is the battery, and I mentioned the timeline. And then the fourth element for us is not looking at a single product, but the whole value production of a company. So we said it must be different whether you have your headquarters here, 90% of your workforce here, any benefits coming to Europe, and then having the same assessment and one single factory from a non-European point. And that's where we say value production is key. And you mentioned our purchasing element. We are pledging also for the production perspective, because we are saying every car which is produced, no matter whether it stays in Europe or it's exported, should count for European value creation. Because I'm coming back to my point, if we are able from Europe to export cars, it means that these are competitive and that they are sold, and by that European industry is competitive. As for the CO2, I mean, you know, the topics is it's about flexibility. I think for the larger cars, it's important element, the fuel part, where we have different points. For the small cars, I understand a different treatment. That's why we had been fine with the super credit, higher one for the small cars. The major issue I had with, or we have with the small cars, is in our opinion, there are too many exemptions. With even in the IRA, for instance, lead that to the point you could claim a European small car, but sourced with components out of Europe, just because it has a European battery, and that's why I'm asking where's your ambition?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Frank. Isabel, you wanted to add something? Yeah.
Just two short comments. One on the technology neutrality. As far as I know, research shows that after latest 2 years, if you look at the life cycle of a battery electric car, that it wins definitely over like an ICE car. So I think we should still remember that in our discussion. And then secondly, you mentioned efficiency. I think what we have not talked about yet sufficiently is that we are quite slow in developing new models. Chinese automakers usually use like 12 to 18 months to bring a new model on the market and test out different technologies and get like feedback from their customers. We are around like 5 to 6 years in the German automotive industry. I don't know about the French ones. So I think we also need to really speed things up a little bit to be competitive.
Thank you very much. Yes, Zala.
I don't have a point, but I can always have one, you know. That's not a problem. Well, I think it's important that we remember here the goal is that we protect our environment. I think this is something we can all agree on. And with that being said, I very much agree that we have to look at also the entire life cycle of a car. Right now, we're only and solely focusing on the tailpipe emissions. And maybe in French, I can also agree that if you have in France a battery electric car, the electricity that comes from it, because you're very good with nuclear power plant, is actually green. But on average in the EU, that's not the case. If you take the Poland, we already have half. But on average, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's about a third of electricity that it's not green, that is produced. So that is also another factor we have to take into account. And when we're discussing this, we can't just not discuss the entire energy package, the grid system, our grids are going to be able to take it, and so on. So I think this is a very important point, and not just solely focus on the tailpipe emissions. It's also when we're talking about manufacturing the car, but also recycling the car. Right now, technology doesn't exist for battery recycling. It's a lot of, well, it's not on a huge scale that you would be able to do it around all of the EU. Sorry, okay, if it is, I'll take it. I'm glad to be corrected. Okay, then I take it back. Like if I learn something along the way, it's great. I'm happy if that is the case. But I still think we have to look at the entire life cycle of the car, and I think the BMW has a good comparison between an ICE model that's produced nowadays, because also the models produced in 2026 are very different than the ones that were produced in 20 years ago. And the battery. I see you, Thomas, that you're like dying, but I'm not giving you the floor quite yet. So I do think we have to have all of the factors in mind. And right now, I know I'm constantly listening how everything is going great, how the battery electric cars are gaining momentum. And yes, that is true. We are seeing an increase in sales. But it still doesn't change the fact that the number one sold cars are some sort of hybrids. Number two are petrol. And only number three are battery electric vehicles. And again, when we talked about how it doesn't give predictability to business as we change 2035, I don't find anything true about this argument, because I don't think you need politicians to tell companies about what they have to develop and to do. I'm sorry, when we had, like, I remember when I was small VHS tape, then we had DVDs, then now we have the cloud. You didn't need to ban them. You didn't have to say now we're banned the DVDs, because it's not true. It's just like automatically when you have a better technology, you get to it and people start using it. And I think we shouldn't be focusing on forcing people into one technology, but enabling conditions for them to use it. In majority of member states, we don't have enough electric charging stations. And I think this should be our goal, because once we do that, then more people are gonna be willing to buy battery electric vehicles, because now this is a concern. When we're talking about the high prices of electricity, of course that is a concern. I charged a plug-in hybrid in Italy, and it was more expensive to charge the electric part than it was to get gas. Of course you're going to do that. I think it's the enabling conditions. And when we have this discussion is going to be easier, and more consumers are going to naturally shift toward the battery electric cars. So I think this should be the primary discussion, not forcing them and completely disregarding the fact that, you know, in many member states, you don't have the conditions for it. And I also want to bring here the role of plug-in hybrids. I can agree that many people don't use them the way that they're supposed to, or use the electric part. I'm not arguing, no, everyone uses it. But it's because not of the technology, and I think it's ridiculous that we kind of, in practice, are trying to limit it. But I think we should be focusing on the part that people are using it the way that it is. And it is a developing technology. So I think we should give companies the chance to prove what they can do with it.
Thank you very much, Zala. And we had a comment coming from the audience, and that's a good signal that we can also shift towards questions from the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We have 2 mics going on. Introduce yourself and also say who you're addressing your question to. Thank you. There is a lady in the middle. If we can give her the microphone. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
5 minutes, okay.
So Conrad from Daimler Truck and Buses, and happy to have here sort of a mini plenary. It's very, very nice to listen to you. I think everybody has somehow a valid point on analysis. What is the problem? What needs to be done? I just wanted to change a bit also the discussion. In the truck business, everything is based on TCO, so costs are everything. It's not like cars where you can buy a red car, a blue car. Truck drivers normally don't care about it. So if the price isn't right, obviously that will influence massively. An electric truck is 2.5 more expensive. That's a massive investment. Obviously, you say there's an overcapacity soon. We have our engineers, we have a bit of a different analysis. Happy to discuss it in parallel as well. But we made calculations, it's going to be 30-40% more expensive. So if the costs are going to rise, and at the same time we have obviously CO2 targets which have to be reached where we have penalties, it is a very challenging environment. So the question for me is also, do we really have the discussion to mandate competitiveness? Do we need more targets to reach competitiveness? And I think if you really want to push for competitiveness, you have to make Europe a nice place to invest, meaning lower energy prices, obviously easier regulation. I just also wanted to react on the speed you mentioned. Just one final point. We have our certification catalog is 20,400 pages. Many of them is EU regulation. We need the time we need to certify vehicles. So it's all a package, and I really would like to also ask each one of you, do you really believe is mandating competitiveness is the right way to move forward? Thank you.
Sorry, you want all the panelists to answer this question?
Well, maybe Mr. Grudler.
Yes, so we have 2 our French MEPs who have to leave quite soon for another engagement. If you want to answer this question, but very, very quickly. Thank you.
To be competitive, nice place to invest, 100%. That's why we need to do many things. One of them, like our capacity to provide regulatory stability, is a comparative advantage, because on the other side of the Atlantic, we have the crazy orange guy that flips up all the time. And so us flip-flopping on CO2 standard for cars would be tragic for many perspectives, but also because it would send a signal not only to the automotive industry, but to all the economic sectors that the EU is following the Trump way. And the Trump way is the road to economic madness. We know that already. And then you need obviously all the rest. For instance, one thing that we barely discuss is the cost of capital. What we try to do is a capex-intensive transformation. Whether you, as you said, for the electric trucks, it's the TCO that matters. Part of the TCO is the capital cost. The lower the capital cost, the lower the TCO of an electric truck. Interest rates have risen by 1% since Trump started his illegal war in Iran. And the ECB has increased its interest rate, because when we depend on oil, this is so tragic for economy that the ECB is forced to increase interest rate for the entire economy. So our choice to listen to the diesel lobby is hurting all economic sectors. Because anytime there is an oil shock, and this is what, the 7th or the 8th in the last 50 years, we have a massive economic shock on the entire economy as a result of the increase of the interest rate. Two final points, because then I've got to go. Special day for France for 2 reasons. I fully agree what you said, for instance, on charging points. But charging points, at the end of the day, it has to do also with a lot of national choices. Should we be kidnapped by Meloni? That's the question. No, really. Like, there are, and I know that thanks to ASEA, there are 3 times more charging points in the Netherlands than in Italy. Even if there are 3 to 4 times more Italians than there are Dutch. And the Italians have many more cars per person than the Netherlands. In the last 6 years, as part of NextGen EU, Netherlands received 5 billion, Italy 200. So why should we destroy CO2 standard for cars? Because a far-right government has been running the Italian economy to the ground, has been betting on gas as the future for the electricity system, because that's why it's expensive. Italy is the only country on the continent that believes that you can do without nuclear and without renewables. It is the only one. You can do with both nuclear and renewables, or you can choose one or the other, you know, but thinking that you can have no renewables and no nuclear and cheap electricity makes no sense. And that has been the Italian governmental choice. 200 billion euros of NextGen EU funding, some of that went to the renovation of football stadiums. I'm not against it. But maybe there was something a bit more important for the future of the Italian industry to be done. But that is the national sovereignty of Italy to run the economy into the ground. But should we, at the EU level, decide to create regulatory unpredictability as a result of one very important country, but still only one country, making very, very poor decisions over the last 4 years? So in conclusion, we need to look at the EU in its diversity. From what I said, you clearly understand that I spent some time thinking about Italy. But then our responsibility as members of the European Parliament is to defend the general interest of the European citizens who elected us. And I think it's good that, and I'm trying to do that myself, like that we enter that negotiation with a bit more humility, because we have a lot to learn. The entire car industry and the BEV value chain is a very complex thing, and I'm learning. You know, last week literally I was learning how you make an anode, which is something I did not know in the past. And if we have humility and pragmatism, then hopefully we will be able to find a good compromise and to deliver the type of predictability with the flexibility that are needed. But generally speaking, to have the predictability to make sure that we can keep and save the current investment that have been happening. And with that word, I wish you a very good end of day. I'm looking forward for the first shadow with Massimiliano Salini, which would be tomorrow. So hopefully I will be even more optimistic after tomorrow's negotiation.
Thank you very much for your insights. You have to go, but we got quite a lot of information. So thank you very much again. And Christophe, you will also have to go, unfortunately. You have a few minutes, yes. If you have anything to answer to the lady, or we take another question.
Is there a lot of questions? I have time to make an answer.
Are there any other questions? Yes, please, at the back.
Thank you. My name is Anastasio Papandreou. I'm from the Cyprus PEMREP. The question I wanted to ask is mostly on the consumer side. We are asking the consumer to make a very big investment by purchasing an electric vehicle. And it might be the case that the consumer already has a perfectly running vehicle. And it could be also the case that the consumer is living in a well-functioning European city with a good public transport, cycleways, etc. And they only need a car for once a week, for example. So there are situations where I think we can be a bit more lenient. And the other thing that I'm considering that we have not really considered is the possibility of changing the current fleet, because there are technologies to convert normal ICE cars to plug-in hybrids. But we just don't really push for them. And I know that from a manufacturing point of view, it's not part of the business case, but there are models that are doing this, either converting to fully electric, but I think it's more difficult, but indeed for a plug-in hybrid it's very easy. So I'd like, the question is, why are we not looking at these alternatives as well, especially for the conversion, because it will make a very big leap with very little expense from the consumer.
Thank you very much for this, Christophe.
Well, first of all, I just want to finish to answer maybe to both questions. We are always looking to the citizens where we are doing legislation. Never forget it. Of course, for the industry and the jobs first, and also for affordable prices for the citizens. And of course, buying a car, but also the price of the fuel. It's crucial for us. But if we want to stop depending on energy, for example, on energy prices, we need to move, and we need to have more strategic autonomy for energy. The Hormuz crisis is clear. Now, when you have an electrical car, it is cheaper than a thermical car. It's a reality of today. Maybe it will not be the case in a few months, but we need to think about it for the citizen. And we have also the possibility of social leasing for electric cars. It's also important. And another thing is for the refueling. We have a text, EU regulation named AFIR. And AFIR explains that there's an obligation to have refueling borne each 50 kilometers along all the corridors in Europe and in very urban sectors. You need also to have more bonds. It is us as Europeans who explain to the member states that they need to do it. It's important for me. But maybe my last word would be a kind of philosophy, because especially in the European Parliament, there's stupid opposition between competitiveness and climate goals. It's absolutely crazy to see this. Okay, we want competitiveness for our companies. Okay, then we will push away every environmental text. It's stupid, because the climate goals are a real opportunity for the industry. If, of course, orange guy said Thomas, if Trump want to say, okay, fossil oil, we do not want clean technology. If America will have 50 years of, will be 50 years late for clean technology, it's a problem. We will make competition with Asia, and we will be another time the leader of the world for that. Well, trust in clean technology, trust in decarbonized production, trust also in the Green Deal, and I'm sure there's a way for big business on that, and I'm sure that it is the future. Then trust in Europe also, because to finish, when you have automotive, you know, I'm coming from an area where it was Stellantis area in Sochaux, in the eastern part of France, next to Switzerland. When I was younger, but younger, so we can say. When I was younger, we in the street, when we can see a car which was not a Peugeot, it was a nightmare, because we talked to the people, why do you are not, we have jobs, our father is working in this factory, and why didn't you buy this? At this time, it was only Peugeot. If you have Renault, it was not good also. but now, the most important is to buy European cars. Of course, maybe sometimes it's too expensive. It's a problem of price today. But try to have kind of, be proud of being a European and be proud of our industry, and try, when it's possible, try to buy European. I think it's a good system. We can continue to have good relationship all around the world. We can win with the industrial accelerator. The investment coming from non-European companies are welcome, but with creating joint ventures, with having jobs in Europe, maybe with some brevets in Europe. We will do the reverse that what we did 40 years ago, and in that case, everything will work. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I need also to leave. Thank you very much. Well.
Input from Isabel, and we say thank you to Christophe.
Just one comment. We have I mean, like the citizens are at the heart of the Green Deal, and everybody agreed that it needs to be a just and fair transition, and that's, for example, why the Social Climate Fund actually uses revenues from the ETS and directs them forward to the more vulnerable households to actually help them to engage in the transformation away from fossil fuels.
100% of the ETS must go back to the industry to help decarbonize, help electrification, help innovation. It's not normal that a huge part of the ETS is going to the general budget of all the member states. We have a tool that can help our industry. Thank you.
I would argue that not all the money should go back to the industries, but it should support actually citizens in building up an ecosystem that supports the whole transformation away from fossil fuels, because then we can actually create like stations where you could cheaply load your car.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Isabel, as well. Do we have any more questions from the audience? I don't see any hands raised at the moment, so I will look for questions from online viewers. Zala, this question will be to you. Is the EU trying to decarbonize the automotive sector faster than its industrial base can realistically adapt?
Well, I think I said this at the beginning, that I think there is a mismatch. So, like, my short answer is yes, and I do think we have the opportunity now to correct that. And I don't mean that by, I do think that the industry definitely needs stability and predictability when it comes to stuff. But I think that the EU has decided we want to go the green path, the carbon neutral path. And I think this gives the industry the direction where they should go. But I don't think we should be micromanaging where it is, because otherwise we're at the point where we are right now. And I was absolutely shocked to learn that in the past 2 years, so 2024 and 2025, 100,000 jobs were lost in European automotive industry, and that's 140 per day. So 140 people per day lost their jobs. And the numbers is only going to increase because now we know that one company, Volkswagen, only announced 100,000 jobs. And coming from Slovenia, I do know that we are seeing companies moving outside the EU because it's close by. The Balkans are close by. You are not covered then by the EU regulation. For us, language is not a big barrier there. So I do think we need to ensure that clean transition and the Green Deal doesn't mean de-industrialized Europe. And Europe also should be aware that we shouldn't only be the market for clean technologies, but we should be the one developing them and manufacturing them. So I do think right now we need to correct the legislation so that our industry has a fighting chance, and that, you know, we can be then at the end the leader. And I think it's absurd that right now we're doing all of this, what we're doing, and China is still surpassing us in the number of patents when it comes to green technologies, and not just in the automotive industry, but in all the industries.
Thank you.
So clearly we need to do something different.
Isabel?
Yeah,
Yes.
I would like to challenge that, because I don't think that the layoff of like hundreds of people is only due to the green transformation. I think there have been like a lot of inefficiencies that we need to look into. We have like very high energy prices in Europe that definitely add to that. We have high wages due to like strong worker unions and stuff like that. So I think it's like a mixture of factors that make currently the automotive industry less competitive to other ones, and that's why that results in layoffs. But it's not the green transformation per se. The green transformation is actually enabling more jobs and creating jobs like that look into new technologies and will lead to new investments, since we have the like a commitment to the climate target now. So that's actually a chance for you. We just need to like use that now, invest wisely, and really make sure that we remain competitive and look at the whole value chain and make sure that we localize more and build up the competences within Europe.
But when you said high energy prices, don't you think that is a result of the green transition? And how can our companies be competitive when the electricity prices in Europe are 5 times more expensive than in China or in the US?
That's true, but it's also like our dependency from fossil fuels that increases the price of energy these days. So I think we have like so many things that we need to work on.
We still have green electricity in Europe. Well, okay, we'll move on to another one, and we'll
Thank you very much. We have another question from the audience, please. Yes.
I think the last discussion, actually, I'm Kurt van der Putten, Senior Advisor. I worked for Umicore and BMW Group as Head of Battery Technology. So sorry for being so blunt and correcting on the battery recycling. No, but the last discussion, I think it's a perfect example where we should really combine in Europe what we need. We need cost competitiveness to make our industry stronger and to serve our citizens, and we need resilience. And this is perfectly combinable, and we try to set that up towards each other. Why are our energy prices so expensive? Because we rely on external energy. So we have to get rid of that. And that's easy possible. Let's go much faster, renewable, decarbonized energy. That's what we need. Let's combine that. I mean, which country in Europe is taxing electricity lower than gas nowadays? Is that normal? I mean, I really hope for you guys here in Brussels, try to unify more and not, you want us to play as Europe against, in the Champions League against US and China, but you divide us in 27 small players.
Do you have a question?
I want to understand, how will you unify us? How will you make us stronger? How will you make us cost competitive? If we are cost competitive, we can do a lot more.
Frank, would you take this question?
I think that was a question to the policy side. I totally agree with you. We have a democratic system which is based on 27 national perspective. We have a how do you say, the institutional trialogue, so between the Commission, the Council and the Parliament. Look, simple example. A year ago, my summer was ruined due to the trade discussions with the US. Yeah? Wherever you were, beer garden, at the lake, wherever a call came in, new information, new negotiation and so on. But at the end, the US made a deal with Europe, whether it's a good or the bad one, I don't want to comment on that, but they implemented to the 1st of August last year. And there was a EU part on that, you know it. And this was, when did you had the vote? 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, on the Turnberry trade? 3 weeks ago. In essence, the only target was to get it before 4th of July this year, so a year longer. And that's something which is our reality in the policy space. The decision-making processes are longer. There's more space to defend different positions, which is fair on the one hand, but the key question is whether our system is still, and that's a question of speed. We're talking about speed in the business, speed of development, but it's about speed of decision making in the democratic system in Europe, and that's our key challenge right now. I wish to have an answer to the unification at that respect. I'm trying to do a little bit on that on the business side, to say the company can have a role on that by bridging with companies in different member states and find a position, but it can't compensate our democratic system how it is right now.
Thank you very much, Frank. We have time for one last question from. Yes. If the answers are very short, then probably 2 questions. Lady here. Yes. You. Thank you. Over there. But really short question and really short answer.
Thanks. Juliette Verdes for Agence Europe. It was really interesting, actually, what you said about Turnberry and the fact that the speed of decision-making in Europe, and there are a lot of industries also criticizing right now the whole omnibus and simplification going on. So I was curious to have your take on that. Maybe, for example, the automotive omnibus. What do you think of simplification processes?
Your question is to? Sorry,
for Mr. Niederländer.
Thank you.
I think the first omnibus was very quick and good thing. The following on ones were a little bit more complicated. Currently, we hope on the current one, the automotive. I think it's not an easy task as it is linked to the 3 other files, and that's where I am wondering whether the initial idea to being fast, to really simplify, will really work out on this one. I think you are deeper in it than I am in the internal discussions.
I think you're right. It is hard because it is tied to what's happening with the CO2 cars, corporate fleets, and the IIA. But right now, just the timeline states that I think the Parliament should have its position by the end of the year. But it is the least controversial file out of the 4, I would say, even though we do have some political questions there of the utility factor and timeline for Euro 7, especially for the heavy-duty sector.
Thank you very much, Zala. And gentlemen, yes, the very last question.
And I'll be very brief. Jacob Stendev, Renew Europe Policy Advisor. I work on the Automotive Omnibus in IMCO, and I have a question to Mr. Frank Niederländer, but it can also trickle out to the others. Congratulations on the Neue Klasse launch. The iX3 and the i3 that have come out are very impressive, both from a meteorological and an industrial perspective. One aspect of the Automotive Omnibus is the small electric vehicle. You touched upon it briefly before. Will legislative initiatives like that be enough for the technology from these new categories of cars that you're launching to trickle down into more affordable alternatives, or is more targeted industrial policy needed in order for us to do so? The others can touch upon it as well. Thank you.
Perhaps let me divide a little bit the topic. I understand right from the beginning. Remember, the first speech of the President of the Commission was about supporting the small car, mainly argued in terms of affordability and so on. I have a slightly different view of that because at the end, resale value and so on are determining the price. But let's put it as an important topic. The second thing then is, how do you define it? And as you say, currently there's a definition which meant 4 meter 20 is the division between a small and a big car, which it's arbitrary. You could say why it's that one, why it's not 4 meter or less or bigger. But the most critical one for us is the creation of a new category of car. This is M1E. I think the size element to say, okay, small car, you need to define something, but to have a special category is for us the most critical point for several reasons. First of all, I don't believe at the long run that you can protect really that segment with, if you say you have a kind of freeze of technology, because even today we are talking about having the latest status of technology be competitive with, namely again, the Chinese one. So how would you believe that at a long run you can protect this segment if you freeze the technology for 10 years and believing that people would buy those cars? I think in the electric field, key element will be the autonomy car. If you have a small car which have 200 kilometers of range, because you have a cheaper battery, and then you have a Chinese car, even with tariffs and so at the same price, with the 800 range, why would they do it? So I think strengthening the segment, the super credit element, having special conditions and so on, it's fine, but creating such a special category, in our opinion, is not the right way. And on top of that, I mentioned in the context of the IRA, I was really surprised that especially those companies promoting the small cars and promoting made in Europe have opened a discussion with a proposal on, as I mentioned, the either-or criteria to skip away from the initial idea to be made in Europe. And that's why it's more the detail than, let's say, the topic and the narrative of a small car. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Frank. And we I'm afraid we already run out of time. We are closing our debate, but I would like to go back to 2035, the year that we started with as a landmark deadline. Let's fast forward and imagine we are already there, and we're having another panel. And to you, what success look like, and maybe even like in one sentence, what kind of headline would you like to read in media about European automotive sector? Very briefly, each one of you. Thank you.
I think the first one would be good that you still have a panel with automotive representative. Second one, I would rather prefer to have a discussion about what is the cutting edge technology we're talking, and being happy about the strengths and the size of the market. And honestly speaking, which I'm missing most in Europe, is a kind of optimism in terms of growth and prosperous future. And that's something I'm hoping on, that we will come back to seeing Europe as a place where things are fostering, where things are innovated, and where there's hope.
Thank you very much. Optimism and hope. Are you as optimistic and hopeful, Zala?
I am, and I'll be very short. So I hope in 2035 you're going to be able to buy a car, whichever you want, be it an EV, a hybrid, an ICE, or whatever, so that we succeed with tech neutrality.
Thank you. Always great to have a choice. Isabel?
I would say that we have like a transportation or mobility concept for which is based on low emission technologies, and which has created a lot of new jobs within Europe and attributed to our prosperity, but at the same time will make sure that we achieve our climate targets, and that's like above and beyond the automotive industry.
Thank you very much. Indeed, above and beyond the automotive industry and across the industrial manufacturing sector through the European Union. Thank you very much again for our panelists, and two panelists that have already departed. We touched upon a very important subject. We spoke at length about China, its positioning, that we need to understand China. We also had views that it's on its way to destroy European industry, but at the same time we need to take lessons from them. We spoke about the Industrial Accelerator Act and about the choice of whether Europe, the future of Europe is electric or there is a choice, and whether we can force legislation, whether there should be some kind of dogmatism or not. Thank you very much again. I hope we can take this conversation forward, and you can go to a cafe next door and you can continue asking your questions if you have any. Thank you very much again for the discussion, sometimes very heated and live debate, which is always great. And thank you very much for your interest. Thank you.